Good evening. My name is Jessica Goebel, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Wisconsin delegation. I am one of three laity who are seated voting delegates for both the general and jurisdictional conferences. This past April and May, myself, along with other laity and clergy, finally got to attend the 2020 postponed general conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. This was a long time coming, as many on the delegation were elected in June of 2019. Tonight, we are going to give you information about who makes up the delegation and what the purpose is, the history of this delegation, what it was like to attend General Conference, how the work got done at General Conference, details about some of the legislation that was passed, and what happens next for our United Methodist Church.
Good evening. I'm Anna Hunter. I am a provisional reserve delegate elected last year. If you don't know those words, find me later. I want to explain a little bit about what exactly General Conference is. The United Methodist Church is one of the few Christian denominations that is truly global. We are not just a U.S. branch of a larger tradition. This means that when we make decisions, we have to come to agreement across different countries, cultures, and laws. This makes it hard to make decisions, but this also means that the decisions we do make are very meaningful. General Conference is that special time. Every 4 years, the delegates from all over the world meet and democratically hash out the vision, mission, and legislation of the institutional church. With that comes all the good and the messy. People meeting and making incredible new friendships, booths, swag from all over the world, and booths teaching you about all sorts of different things, and the heightened emotions and boring rules that happen because people care and are trying to make the world a better place. For example, just in the US context, United Methodists have the only non-governmental building on Capitol Hill, right across from our Capitol building. Our global institutional church has been big enough with enough investments that we can literally affect business markets and hold companies accountable for how they treat people and the world. General Conference is where some of the decisions at that level take place.
Hi, I'm Gail Burgess, a North Central Jurisdictional Delegate elected in 2023. I'd like to tell you about the who at General Conference. If all delegates in 2020-2024 had been able to attend, there could have been 862 in attendance, one half laity and one half clergy, with 55.9% from the USA, 32% from Africa, 6% from the Philippines, 4.6% from Europe, and 1.5% from concordant churches. There are so many others who make General Conference what it is, though. In addition to the delegates, there are 59 bishops who preside over the sessions but have no vote, as well as the Judicial Council members, the individuals and groups providing music and worship, and representatives from the various United Methodist general agencies. There are the missionaries present to be commissioned, the deaconesses and home missioners being consecrated, and the young people present to address the body. And there are a multitude of volunteers, registrars, greeters, pages and marshals, monitors and translators and observers. All were present in Charlotte, North Carolina, a few weeks ago.
Hi, my name is Don Kramer, and I am a member of Milwaukee Central United Methodist Church in the Southeast District. I'm a jurisdictional delegate, and I was elected in June 2019. I'm going to give you a brief summary of all that happened between my election in 2019 to the General Conference that occurred just last month. The Wisconsin delegation for the 2020 General Conference was elected in June 2019. Our delegation has a total of 20 members, 10 lay and 10 clergy. The first 6, that's 3 lay and 3 clergy, are General Conference delegates. The first 12, 6 lay and 6 clergy, represent Wisconsin at the jurisdictional conference. The remaining 8 are reserve delegates to fill positions if someone else cannot serve. As you are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic changed many plans in 2020, including the General Conference, which was postponed twice before it was rescheduled for 2024. That's an important fact. The 2020 General Conference was not canceled, it was held in 2024. All of the legislation that was submitted for 2020, plus what was submitted afterwards, needed to be considered at this recent General Conference. And the delegates that were originally elected for 2020 are, for the most part, those who served in 2024. However, the delegation that was elected in 2020 had several notable changes in the following 5 years. Among the lay delegates, 5 of us left the delegation. 2 left for family and illness reasons. 1, John Lawson, sadly died from cancer. 2 left because their churches disaffiliated from the UMC. I also want to note, among the clergy delegates, we also had a vacancy because Dan Shreen was elected to be bishop in 2022. Just a side note of what was happening on the clergy side of our delegation. But back to the lay. Because of these vacancies, we elected 5 more lay delegates in June of 2023. They have been a great help to those of us who have served since 2019. They have jumped in with enthusiasm and have learned a great deal in a short amount of time. I'm very grateful for the renewed energy that they have brought to this delegation. During the 5-year postponement, our delegation saw several changes, and so did the rest of the denomination. With the creation of the Global Methodist Church and the disaffiliation of about a quarter of our churches, the makeup of the UMC changed a great deal since 2019. Our conference lost about 10% of our churches and members. Our delegation also lost 2 out of 20 delegates. However, some of our delegations saw considerably higher levels of turnover. There was a great deal of uncertainty of who would actually be attending this general conference after so much change at the conference levels. I hope this quick summary gave you enough context for how we got to this general conference, and I now turn to Alan, who will tell you a little about the actual experience in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, the Queen City, the largest city of North Carolina, with a modern downtown, yet with hidden bits of history. A city where one night I witnessed a convoy of lighted scooter, balance boards, and unicycles streaming through the downtown on the main street. The next night, the spectacle was a collection of decked-out, lighted dune buggies. Charlotte Convention Center, where the train runs to the upper deck every 15 minutes, and NASCAR is the permanent attraction. Only a block from downtown and within easy walking distance for 90% of the delegates. Greetings, brothers and sisters. I am Alan Lindsay, a reserved laity delegate to General Conference. I am a member of Oak Creek Community United Methodist Church in the Southeast District. Every day of the conference started with a worship session, as befitting a church conference, with the opening worship sermon offered by Bishop Thomas Beckerton, setting the tone for the conference. Worship sessions included music, both the old hymns as well as more contemporary music, dance, and other elements to bring us together. Of note, this session of the General Conference did not meet on Sunday. Instead, during the 2 Sundays, conference attendees visited various churches throughout the city. The preliminary sessions was where the business of the conference takes place, while the preliminary of the first day was dedicated to how the conference would function. The succeeding sessions of the preliminary presented reports, presentations, petitions, and legislation from various standing committees and legislative committees, including a report of the church finances. Among the petitions advanced during the first week were several regarding regionalization, which set them up to be voted on by the full conference, as well as a petition to recognize the provisional reserves as reserve delegates. There were multiple addresses from various groups, including United Women in Faith, a laity address, and an exciting young people address. Of course, in this international gathering, there was a need for translators, not only during the preliminary session, but also in each legislative committee and subgroup during deliberation. The conference had a staff of over 180 translators, covering 10 languages, including English, French, Korean, Russian, Spanish, and American Sign Language, among others. The delegates and observer were linked to these translators via portable devices that allowed each delegate to select the language they were most comfortable with. Officially, General Conference 2020 started on Tuesday, April 23rd, but the hospitality of the Queen City could not wait until then. Greeting early arrivals in the week before at the airport were red apron volunteers waving General Conference sign, assisting delegates, as well as any interpreters and other staff with collecting their luggage from baggage claim, verifying hotel assignments, and providing transportation to these hotels. This group of volunteers from the North and South Conference, as well as many other conferences, were the first sight many had at a conference. At the hotel, volunteers assisted with check-in and provided direction to the conference center, or to food, or to anything the delegates might need. While the greeters were primarily there to guide delegates in their journey, we also provided support to staff, bishops, interpreters, and any others heading to their hotels or the conference center. By the start of the conference, these volunteers had greeted over 500 arrivals, helped with lost baggage, and even recovered one lost delegate. At the Charlotte Convention Center, through the 2.5 weeks of the conference, other red apron volunteers directed traffic, provided information, greeted delegates and other visitors with a smile, and assured all felt welcome. In this role, even before my credentials were authenticated, I was given a chance to interact with the greater conference at all levels. There were over 1,000 volunteers giving of their time and talents. For a full view of the volunteers, check out GC 2020 Daily Wrap-Up for April 26, 2024 on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Linda Hodorf from Fond du Lac County. I'm a lay member of Campbellsport United Methodist Church in the Northeast District. Last year, I was elected as a North Central Jurisdiction Reserve Delegate. Since then, I've attended the Wisconsin Delegation monthly meetings, both to get better acquainted and to learn more about our UMC decision-making process. I was blessed to spend 10 days at General Conference. Each morning from 7 to 11, I worked at the registration desk and then attended legislative and plenary sessions for the rest of the day. At registration, we used iPads to match credentials and with driver's licenses or passports, and laptops to print specially coded photo ID badges like these. These badges were vital for the security staff to assure that only voting delegates entered the delegates' dining area and the main plenary area. Voting delegates received all meals at the convention center, saving time and money. As reserves, most of our meals were on our own, but we did have 2 group meals. One was a dinner for laity, and another was a Wisconsin Northern Illinois Conference's Get Acquainted dinner, since we'll soon be sharing a bishop. We registered over 700 delegates, plus hundreds of reserves, exhibitors, official translators, media, and observers. It's safe to say daily attendance averaged 2,000 people. What an honor to register attendees from all over the world, and also pastors representing many other denominations. During week 1 legislative committees and week 2 plenary sessions, observers and delegates were seated separately. Since Wisconsin had only 6 voting delegates and there were 14 legislative committees, our reserves attended committees that weren't already covered by our delegates. I audited 2 different committees, local churches and faith and order. Our Wisconsin group set up a WhatsApp system to text each other updates from our various locations. Communion was offered many times during the conference, and if a session began to get tense or seemed at an impasse, singing familiar hymns and group prayer helped working through things. It set a great example for us to try back home. There was also a large prayer room with multiple prayer stations and space for private quiet time. In summary, I arrived at Charlotte excited but apprehensive. I wondered if 2 full weeks would really be necessary and if there were better ways to address our church issues. But after working and learning from 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. daily, plus a welcome Sabbath day to worship at a local church, I came home tired but spiritually renewed. My joy comes not because of the legislation, whether it passed or didn't. It's due to the biblical diligence I witnessed, the careful listening, and fully vetting of issues before taking a vote. Thank you for the opportunity to represent you in Charlotte.
Now I'll talk a little bit about the typical day for a delegate. As a delegate, our days began early and ended late. Security was important, so each day we were screened and checked in before we could enter the plenary area. This is the area where all of the discussion and voting took place. Each delegation had a specific area to sit in, and from there we sat in the order that we were elected, alternating laity and clergy. We kept our voting and translation devices handy for each plenary session. Every day there was an updated newsletter-like document with that day's consent calendar and any other amended petitions or resolutions we would be voting on that day. As seated voting delegates, we spent a lot of time networking with other delegates and discussing legislation. As been said by some of the other people in this group, we spent the first week in our legislative committees. We were able to address all 1,100 petitions and resolutions. All of the delegates were divided into 14 groups, which was called your legislative committee. A good portion of the first week is spent in these groups, which included delegates from around the globe. As a group, we discussed each petition, possibly created amendments, spoke for and against the petitions and the amendments, and finally took a vote. If there were less than 10 votes against, that legislation would be on the consent calendar the following day. The consent calendar is where a group of petitions are voted on together as a block. There was always an opportunity for a petition to come off that consent agenda after receiving 20 or more signatures from other delegates. Communication skills were tested for these committees as there were a number of language and contextual areas to navigate. For me, this was my favorite part of being a delegate. The United Methodist Church is truly a big tent with many cultures, languages, and contexts present in each conversation. It was easy to see God in each person of the group as we worked through for the good of the church.
I am Kathy Hartke, lay delegate for Community United Methodist Elm Grove and first alternate delegate to North Central Jurisdictional Conference that will meet in July. I volunteered as a host greeter at the Convention Center and observed the Church and Society Committee 2 along with the plenary and worship sessions. On May 2nd, delegates completed adoption of the first overhaul of our United Methodist Social Principles, written in 1972, nearly 50 years ago. The social principles contained in both in the Book of Discipline and Book of Resolutions are statements that reflect official United Methodist teachings on a wide range of topics. They are not church law, but are intended to inform United Methodist witness on issues of the day with a biblical foundation. In 2012, General Conference approved revising the social principles, setting in motion an extensive process that involved input from people around the world, coordinated by the General Board of Church and Society. In addition to the language changes regarding human sexuality and inclusiveness, the social principles addressed the importance of advocating for human dignity and combating racism and other threats, caring for creation and the environment, standing against social ills, and supporting healthy communities in all its forms, including economic, social, and political. The document is available in 7 languages for the whole church to read and discuss. Each section is introduced by relevant scriptural passages and excerpts from John Wesley's writings. The new document consolidates the 6 sections into 4, the social, political, and economic communities, and the community of all creation. The revised social principles removed the phrase, "The practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching," which has been a source of harmful language to LGBTQ persons since its adoption in 1972. Over 8 years, this team spent 4 years conducting listening sessions throughout the denomination's connection, followed by 52 writing teams comprised of United Methodist clergy, lay, young adults, and ethnic caucus members from Africa, Europe, the Philippines, and the United States, compiling a first draft based on the listening sessions. Then, with the first draft in hand, more than 4,000 United Methodists read, reviewed, and commented on the initial document. Their feedback contributed to the resulting petitions, which shared church teachings on matters of diverse as poverty, climate change, immigration, substance abuse, and colonialism. The economic community verbiage took feedback from groups in Africa, the Philippines, and Eurasia to add language on the topic of poverty and income inequality that rejects the prosperity gospel teaching that wealth is a sign of God's favor. A new book of resolutions was adopted, including readopting many resolutions that had expired and approving new ones, addressing topics such as climate change, rights of farm workers in the U.S., the observance of the Children's Sabbath, reproductive health care, ableism, caring for Native people, and opposition to racial profiling with attention to being inclusive of all communities. Why do we have these social principles and resolutions? The resolutions say, we care. Delegates to the General Conference of the United Methodist Church believe that we each need and deserve the guidance of the whole denomination as we face daily hopes, struggles, joy, and pain. The resolutions and social principles express our church community's beliefs and give us evidence that the church intends for God's loves to reach into situations faced each day, not just on Sunday mornings. Not all of us are intimately involved with each issue, but someone somewhere is. The revised social principles are intended to be read, shared, and discussed in Sunday school classes and Bible studies, studied in seminaries, and preached from pulpits. And perhaps more importantly, are meant to inspire United Methodists around the world to live into our social holiness heritage. It was a great joy to work with all the members of our delegation. I am very blessed. Thank you, and now you will hear from Lisa King, who will present the removal of harmful language.
Hi, I'm Lisa King, one of the voting delegates to General Conference and a member of the Fall River UMC in the Southwest District. Additional significant changes made to the Book of Discipline at this year's General Conference relate to removal of harmful language related to LGBTQIA+ individuals. Finally, for the first time in the 240-year history of the United Methodist Church and its predecessor denominations, we no longer officially discriminate against one or more groups of individuals. Kathy just described the removal of language relating to homosexuality in the revised social principles. Also changed in the social principles was the definition of marriage, which has now been broadened to say it is a sacred lifelong covenant between an adult man and adult woman of consenting age, or two adult persons of consenting age. In addition to this change, approved changes to the Book of Discipline now allow LGBTQIA+ individuals to be ordained as clergy persons in the UMC. Clergy can now perform same-sex weddings, but they are not required to. As has always been the case, clergy choose who they will or will not marry. Likewise, same-sex weddings can now be performed in churches, but churches can also choose not to allow them on their property. Finally, prohibitions on giving funds to any gay group or otherwise using such funds to promote the acceptance of homosexuality have also now been removed from the Book of Discipline. Most of these changes were approved by significant percentages of the General Conference delegates as items on consent calendars. While some delegates would have preferred to add language more affirming of LGBTQIA+ individuals in recognition of the fact that different individuals and regions within the UMC have different viewpoints on human sexuality, most delegates deliberately chose to simply remove harmful language. Lisa is now going to talk about the third area of significant votes at General Conference, which is regionalization.
Thank you, Lisa King. Hello, I am the other Lisa on the delegation, Lisa Jones, and I'm proud to represent the Wisconsin Conference. My home church is Brown Deer United Methodist Church. Regionalization would restructure the denomination where ministry can happen in different ministry contexts. Many of the things discussed at General Conference are US-centric. We spent a lot of time on legislation that only impacts the US, as this is the only place for us in the US to discuss our current governance structure. This proposes a restructuring of the worldwide church based on equity and respect for regional mission contexts. Under legislation, the US and each central conference, church regions in Africa, Europe, and the Philippines would become regional conferences with the same authority to adopt the Book of Discipline, the denomination's policy book, for more missional effectiveness. It's long overdue, an important step towards decolonizing both polity and relationships. It keeps us connected as a worldwide church and offers autonomy in regional decision-making. Historically, such authority was held only by central conferences under the church's constitution. The amendment passed with a 78% majority. That was 586 to 164 votes in the no, signaling strong support for a more decentralized and culturally sensitive governance model. With this historic General Conference, the passing of the Council of Bishops president also occurred from Bishop Thomas Bickerton to Bishop Tracy Malone Smith. Bishop Malone is the first Black woman to serve as the president of the Council of Bishops. Bishop Malone said of regionalization, "It sends a clear signal that the church is ready to embrace a new way toward the next expression of the United Methodist Church. We are a beautiful, diverse, international, worldwide church, and the regionalization plan reflects what that looks like. Yes, it decenters the United States, but it also dismantles colonialism, giving us a sense of agency and a sense of autonomy while still keeping us connected in mission as a single body of people called United Methodists." This General Conference also saw a budget that passed. Due to disaffiliations and financial constraints of the many in the denomination, the budget is 41% lower than 2016 General Conference. With this harsh reality, the number of bishops in the US will be 32 instead of 39, and Africa will get additional 2 bishops instead of 5. Our general agencies have worked over the years to do their work with less staff. With this financial reality, many of our churches, the current base rate for apportionments for 2025 and 2026 will be reduced to 2.6%. If apportionment giving increases to 90%, as it was in 2018, the apportionment in 2027 and 2028 will be 2.9%. We also passed a new retirement plan for clergy that would allow them more control over their retirement funds, including helping clergy pay off student loans. Compass, the new retirement program, is designed to increase plans to sustainability, provide adequate income in retirement for clergy, be affordable for local churches and annual conferences, be equitable and fair across different pay levels, and give clergy flexibility and portability. For the first time, we will have a full communion agreement with the Episcopal Church. Full communion means each church acknowledges the other as a partner in the Christian faith, recognizes the validity of each other's baptism and Eucharist, and commits to work together in ministry. Such an agreement also means Episcopalians and the United Methodists can share clergy. Deacons can also now preside at sacraments in their appointments without needing explicit permission from their bishop. This means deacons can now offer Holy Communion and conduct baptisms where they have been appointed to serve, whether that is a church, outreach ministry, or mission. Woo! What a historic General Conference. So where do we go from here? I now turn it over to Jessica, Our Lady co-chair of the General Conference delegation, to tell us the next steps.
Thanks, Lisa. Our work does continue after the General Conference because the regionalization legislation involves a change to the Constitution in the Book of Discipline. Regionalization now needs to be voted on by each annual conference around the globe. To pass and take effect, this needs to be approved by at least 2/3 of the total votes cast across all the annual conferences around the globe. The Wisconsin Annual Conference will vote on worldwide regionalization in June of 2025 at their annual conference. Throughout the next year, our delegation will be working to educate the clergy and laity in Wisconsin about regionalization before it can be voted on next year. Jurisdictional conferences will take place this summer. We are part of the North Central jurisdiction, and our conference will take place July 10th through the 13th in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The first 6 delegates elected for the clergy and laity make up the voting delegates for this conference. Based on what we know about the budget, we will be reducing our number of bishops from 9 to 6 in our North Central jurisdiction. The Episcopacy Committee will be figuring that out at this conference. Last January, the North Central Jurisdictional Conference voted to have Wisconsin and Northern Illinois, as well as East and West Ohio, share a bishop. This is not a merger of 2 annual conferences. It simply means that 2 annual conferences are sharing a bishop. Our current bishop has served Wisconsin for 12 years, so we know we will for sure be assigned a new bishop by the Jurisdictional Committee on the Episcopacy in July. Your prayers are appreciated as we move through all of these processes and transitions. Well, many of our delegates have already mentioned this. However, I will mention it again as we close. We thank you for electing us to serve for the laity of the Wisconsin Annual Conference, and we're grateful to have your prayers while we spent 2 weeks in Charlotte, North Carolina. Please pray for our delegation as we continue our work for the United Methodist Church. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions about what happened at General Conference or what is coming at the North Central Jurisdictional Conference. Blessings to you all.